There's a new report out of the Huffington Post that even shocked me. Gun control proposals are pretty universally popular, especially among Democratic voters. But that doesn't mean that the Democratic establishment isn't going to be completely cowardly when it comes to addressing the topic of gun control and fighting for the lives of every one of us who could be the victims of this random violence at any point in our lives, the movie theater, at a school, wherever. The morning after the October 1st mass shooting in Las Vegas, a member of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee's press staff warned House candidates and their staffs not to politicize the shooting that day. Politicization, according to the DCCC official, included talking about gun violence prevention policy. You and your candidate will be understandably outraged and upset, as will your community. However, do not politicize it today, in all caps, DCCC Regional Press Secretary Evan Lukaski wrote to candidates in the Northeast. There will be time for politics and policy discussion, but any message today should be offering thoughts and prayers for victims and their families, and thanking first responders who saved lives. This is the Democratic Party. An email from the press secretary for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, tongue twister, and they are instructing their candidates to say thoughts and prayers and not politicize the issue. These are Republican talking points that are designed specifically to ensure that those Republicans never have to talk about actual policy and thus piss off their gun manufacturing donors. And once again, in their cowardice, the Democrats have internalized those GOP talking points and have decided to hand over the framing of the conversation to them, much like when Dianne Feinstein says, Medicare for all is a government takeover of healthcare. And the phrase thoughts and prayers, don't even get me started there. Thoughts and prayers is such a joke that it has been reappropriated by the liberal Democratic base to mock Republicans' inaction on gun control. But shunning their base, per usual, the DCCC unironically is telling candidates to say thoughts and prayers. Gun violence prevention activists said they were disappointed the DCCC was advising candidates not to aggressively talk about policy solutions as often as possible. Lad Everett, director of the gun violence prevention group One Pulse for America, described the DCCC email as pathetic. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who has arguably been the most vocal advocate for gun reform since Sandy Hook happened in his state, emphasized that the DCCC email was a message from one staffer. This is an obvious attempt to cover it up or just to glaze over it, which makes sense because it's Murphy's party, but come on. Does anyone believe that the regional press secretary sent out an all-caps PR directive to their candidates without any discussions with the party's officials, at least in that region? No, of course not. And that's because Democratic leadership in this country is unfortunately defined by their spinelessness and their cowardice in many ways. More backpedal here. Meredith Kelly, the DCCC's communications director, emphasized that Lukaski's message was intended to discourage hasty responses before all information about the shooting was known, rather than silence opinions about gun policy. It was also general advice that candidates were free to ignore. Right, because the DCCC is so good to candidates who don't follow their wishes. This isn't an isolated incident when it comes to the DCCC chapters. Just before this story broke, the DCCC published an opposition research memo on one of its own candidates in the primary, Laura Moser, who was running in the March 6th primary in Texas, purely because she's a progressive, just trying to smear her. Another instance of the DCCC shrinking towards the right, trying with all its might to pull the party away from progress and to crap all over whatever the base wants. In fact, they would rather smear the progressive Laura Moser, and if she wins the primary, have that opposition research be out there for Republicans to take advantage of in the general election. Because, as illustrated with this Vegas email, a push to the right is more desirable for many in the Democratic establishment than a push towards progress. And that's the unfortunate reality. That's why we have to get new leadership and vote in 2018.